yoga is the conscious path to God. So you need to have the intention to walk this path towards God.
I feel like any fixation on what Patanjali presents as being the yoga in a sense, without understanding that he was a conduit for something before him, is again flawed. It's again incomplete.
They talk differently about how yoga works. They talk differently about what the techniques do. They have different intentions to do yoga.
For someone like a Guruji, when he looks at modern yoga, he's just so critical of it. I know very well what's in the mind of the people that are coming to take this course. And they're not going to sit there day one to hear it's about self-surrender to God.
Yeah.
Shandilya, I just wish I had a different name.
I could argue that we have very strong techniques. A yoga technique doesn't become an instrument, but it becomes love.
Mm-hmm.
Atma Kriya is the action, the conscious action of the soul, of the divine that is in you. Mm-hmm. If in my life I have this story where I can give Kriya to other people, that's a life worth living.
Jai Gurudev, Shandilya.
Jai Gurudev, Swami Revatikaanta.
Welcome to my podcast. We have known each other for a long time.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Most welcome. So this is, I think, a long coming conversation that I think we should have had for a while, and let's do it here on camera.
Love it.
Go through your history a little bit of spirituality, who you are, how you got here, and then eventually we'll dive into today's topic, which is going to be yoga in a variety of
my pleasure.
ways. So who is Shandilya?
Shandilya. So I was born in Russia, and my family moved to Germany when I was 7. I grew up in Germany. I went here to school. I finished school. I went to university, studied mathematics and computer science. You know me well in that sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very mathematical mind.
We go way back.
Yep.
And already during actually my high school years, and moreover when I started studying, I became more and more interested in spirituality, yoga, meditation, a lot of things.
Mathematical guy, why?
It's not that because I would say because I'm spiritual, I'm also interested in mathematics. Mathematics has been for me always been a very clear science, also an art of thinking clearly and making the right conclusions, not making the wrong assumptions. And I always appreciated that. In mathematics, there is no way of interpretation, of personal opinion. You can prove it, it's right. You can't prove it, it's wrong. Mm-hmm. Or it's maybe not right yet. You don't know. And also to say, I don't know, is also something that I appreciated in mathematics. So I always was a thinker. That's something I think you can say about me. I like to think about philosophy, spirituality, and mathematics, and science, and many other things. Yeah. So with me, I can say I got lucky with my parents. They are spiritual. They have been always spiritual. I grew up as a vegetarian. We always had conversations about karma at home. For example, when I was sick, my mother would take a candle and pray. And I would feel that power also from childhood on. And that always stayed with me. We were never forced or pushed, anything like that. And when I came into the late teenager years, last year of high school, I became more and more interested in also Vedic culture, more yoga, meditation, mantra, Ayurveda, a lot of those kind of things. And I was looking already for spiritual masters. I was reading books different. I was reading already the Gita. And then, we heard about Guruji. I grew up here in Germany, so it's a 3-hour drive from my parents' home. We came for darshan. And that's where my journey with Guruji started, my journey with Bhakti Marga.
How old were you at the time?
I was 22. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so since you last year of high school, you started getting more interested in this. Like between then and 22, what kind of access was there in Germany to Vedic culture, to spirituality? Like what did you find in those years?
I have to say that there are certain temples here and kirtan groups, sure. I found those. But mostly my education happened through the Russian language. Right. So there are, I would say, especially at that time, more available content about Vedic culture, about astrology, numerology, Ayurveda, many cultures and philosophy in the Russian language.
Yeah, the Russian Sangha is super strong.
Yeah. And through that, I learned a lot of things. And then actually when I met Guruji, many things were already known to me. Till then, I was looking for a guru. I didn't find yet one. And when I met him, after quite some time, I then understood that he knows me, I know him, and that he is guiding me where I need to go. This is also the time when we both met.
True. Yeah, I remember. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I have some memory that before you joined Guruji, you were either going to the ISKCON Hare Krishna temple. Yes. Yeah, so that was something that was regular.
Yeah, definitely. I went there for a few months already before. I have been active in the Sangha. I learned to serve in the temple. I learned to do seva. I learned some scriptures, different customs that are not so different from ours.
Of course, yeah.
Puja, bhajans, kirtans, the veneration of the Guru, Tulsi, many things. How to use a japa mala, to the power of the name of God, many things. And it wasn't feeling like that is exactly my path, but it was very welcome in my life also.
Valuable. Yeah.
Yes, and I'm very grateful for that also.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So once you joined Bhakti Marga, and I don't know exactly how you got there, but in my mind somehow it was quite a short trip until I started to I see you and identify you as this yoga meditation type guy. You were very much immersed into that, and you started to get more and more, I would say, involved, more and more responsibility eventually given to you by Guruji as well to be involved in our Atma Kriya yoga department, teaching, training teachers, all of these things. So talk a little bit through that. Like, how did that happen? How did you get to that position?
Funny enough, I learned Atma Kriya quite early. When I came to Guruji, and 1 month later, I learned Atma Kriya.
So just people don't know, Atma Kriya yoga, of course, is the technique that we teach in Bhakti Marga from Guruji, from Mahavatar Babaji. Incredible sadhana. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now.
We will get hopefully to that. So I learned Atma Kriya, and I was still living with my parents. I was studying at university. For me, became Atma Kriya my daily driver. I have to say, it replaced at that point the different other practices I was doing. It became a complete system, but moreover, it became something where I felt the connection with Guruji, with the divine, that I haven't experienced before. And I was literally daily looking forward to come home and to do my Kriya. Also, I was waking up early in the morning to do my Kriyas, and I loved it. It just became something where I could feel closer to myself, and where I could feel mostly my relationship with him. And it was beautiful. And I had that strong desire at that point. I didn't know what will happen in my life. I didn't know that I will come to the ashram. I didn't know. But one thing was clear to me, that if in my life I have Atma Kriya, and if in my life I have the story where I can give Kriya to other people, then doesn't matter what will happen in my life else. But if that is there, that's a life worth living.
Wow.
Yeah. And with that intention, 1 year later, after meeting Guruji, I became Atma Kriya teacher. I think you were right there with me in that training.
Correct.
Yeah, we became teachers together. And I started to share it. I started to travel also to other countries, give courses. And
I think that's what I remember most. Like, you were really prolific, like early on, teaching a lot.
It was something that when I teach Kriya, I speak from my heart. It's something so beautiful, and it's still, till today, a heartfelt desire to give it to the people and to empower the people to have it. And it's one of the greatest graces that I have in my life to be able to share it.
Oh, because you love it. And I think it's like the fact that eventually you gain so much responsibility in this, it's completely connected to that. I mean, so many times people ask Guruji, what's my dharma? When's my real dharma coming? And he always says, learn to love what you're doing now, and then the dharma will come. And it's like, it doesn't shock me at all that because you just shared, you love it genuinely. A lot of people, we like it, but we don't love it. It's this feeling of like, I do it because I know it's good for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like taking vitamins or taking some workout or something. I don't love it, but it's good for me. I'll do it happily. Like there's no resistance, but it's also not this thing of I'm waking up like eager to do it. Like I look forward to doing it, right? And I think that's really what differentiates, like when you can really find that love for something, I mean, sky's the limit, right?
And then it doesn't even feel like work.
Yeah.
It feels like pleasure.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing when you can get to that point. I can identify for sure, because at the same time, we became teachers and you really were diving into this. Obviously, I was diving into knowledge a bit more in the scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
And I often share the same thing. Like when I'm teaching, when I'm spreading that, it's a different feeling. It's a really different feeling.
Yeah. And it was a pleasure also to see how, we went in a certain sense a similar path. It went also into different directions, but that part we share. And I'm sure you can also say that it becomes a part of what drives you in the daily life, and that joy to also the challenges. I even like you embrace them, but moreover the joy of seeing how it helps people.
For sure. And I think one of the things that always I have is a strong memory, because at that time also you were brahmachari, right? I mean, how many years was it? So you met Guruji, you were 22, 21?
I was 22. I became quickly 23.
And brahmachari?
I became like maybe 20 when I was 25. I was brahmachari for like 5 to 6 years.
Exactly, yeah.
I was resident here in the ashram for 9 years.
Yeah.
And after then I became a teacher trainer already after 1 year here. I started to help educating new teachers, also because I speak multiple languages in that sense. And later I started to working in the department here. And later on I took more and more responsibility. At a certain point I was then responsible for the teaching, for the management side of it, multiple practices. We had a team, and it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember that time, of course, when we were residents together, we were living in the same corridor as brahmachari. And I think it was a lot of like that discipline factor that, as you said, it doesn't become work. It's something pleasure, really, that always struck me, because, again, we were both in our 20s at that time. And it's this feeling of like, I go to my room and I'm like, okay, I got to do some sadhana. I should do it. But then I visit people like yourself, people like Swami Aniruddha at the time also, people who I knew loved it. It wasn't something like I should do it because it's right. Really loved it. And it always stuck with me, like this feeling of there's no doubt in my mind you have to get to that point if you really want to taste the full fruit of what it is.
That's the essence of the practice. And that's, I think, also something that differentiates Atma Kriya from many other traditions. That aspect of bhakti and love. And you don't do it because you have to do it or because that it gets you somewhere. But you do it because you can, because you enjoy it. And it becomes an expression of your relationship with him. It doesn't get you to the relationship, it already becomes where you can experience a place where you can experience that relationship. And of course, it takes discipline, it takes dedication, and also you need to study also the knowledge connected to that.
Sure.
And then like that, you can go deeper and deeper into it, for sure.
So then when you took on these different responsibilities, right, and you were training teachers in a sense, how did that go for you? Because of course, it's a different responsibility, it's a different expectation. I remember one thing at the time, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it. One of the things at the time, Guruji it was a fine line for a long time of Guruji saying like not to overcomplicate Kriya. And I remember we were always somehow on this fine line of like, because as you said, there is a knowledge around it. There is, students often, actually, the students are the ones who often come with 100 questions, and then there's somehow pressure on the teacher to answer those questions about the wider context of yoga and the techniques and everything. How did you handle that in that time? Because of course you were part of that team that was dealing with that kind of feedback and that kind of situation. What was your take on that? Like the simplicity versus complexity of yoga.
It has been definitely one of the main topics that has been important, especially to me. Maybe it wasn't always that obvious to the outside because we try to keep it clear and simple. But what is yoga? Yoga is not a clear, defined term. It's been used in times and traditions and scriptures differently. Also, the way we understand yoga when we come here, the way we grew up in this world with what yoga is nowadays, those are very different terms and very different contexts. So when you receive Atma Kriya, how do you understand it? Because Kriya, what has been since centuries, Kriya is a tradition that has been taught orally, personally, by a master. There's not much philosophy attached to that because the technique speaks for itself. You don't need to think about the technique, you practice it. And the practice, if you do it with dedication and love, it opens up the meaning that is behind it. So while that is happening, while we are taking the first steps on this journey, we of course have to educate. We of course have to answer the questions. We of course have to, it's a worldwide movement. It's a worldwide mission. We of course have to communicate it in different cultures and countries and languages and backgrounds. And here we started to learn how to do it best, how to understand who we are, what is our path, what is our tradition, also who we are not. It doesn't mean that something is better or worse. It's not. It's just different. And this journey to understand our identity in yoga has been taking us also a few years. And I have to say also the knowledge department and the work that you are doing has been a great help here. Yeah. So we can talk about it much more, but...
Well, let's do it, because I think the reason also what was, as I asked the question, I realized that my thinking behind it is that I feel like you, the teacher training body, has one interpretation of how things should be or what yoga means and what Atma Kriya yoga means. The teachers learn to imbibe that, but the students have often 100 different concepts about what yoga is. As you said, it's so widespread, right? This idea of yoga. And so there sometimes can just be a mismatch and people speaking across each other, missed expectations. And so I think one of the cool things we could achieve today in this conversation is to map out a little bit what are the different concepts of yoga, definitions of yoga, emphasis on different parts, and just sort of talk around that. And I'd love to, sort of hear that from you.
Absolutely. I definitely have encountered that. I have been teaching on many courses and people come with very different understandings into my course. And I have to take them on a journey. So I have learned to start actually my course with the words, yoga is the conscious path to God. So, and I want to make it very clear. This course, it's very controversial.
God, and wait a minute.
God, I know.
Yeah.
But I want to say here, and then I start explaining that.
Sure,
yes.
Sure, of course.
But I want to position myself very clearly. Yoga, it's a conscious path towards God. So first of all, it's a path. It's not from today to tomorrow. You go it. It's conscious. So you need to have the intention to walk this path towards God. You can call it towards divine love, to divinity, towards your eternal relationship with Him. There are many words to describe that. I say towards God. And here I clearly set the stage. And I want to differentiate also here from different understandings of yoga. The way I would explain it best is there are three understandings of yoga. The yoga that is given in the Bhagavad Gita, Later, the yoga that was given by Patanjali. And moreover, what happened with his understanding of yoga and how it evolved in the tradition within Hinduism, the yoga tradition. And then we also have the modern understanding of yoga, the nowadays understanding of yoga. Those three have connections, but they're also quite distinct from each other. So the Bhagavad Gita yoga, it's a very spiritual, the most complete understanding of yoga. It's less about techniques. It's more about the philosophy and the relationship with him. And Krishna describes three, again, we can call it three distinct philosophies or three distinct yoga styles, the karma, jnana, and the bhakti yoga. But eventually he comes to the bhakti yoga. And the Bhagavad Gita is a scripture about yoga. He uses it throughout the Gita. And he explains what it means to be a yogi. And moreover, he comes to the conclusions about the unity between, I would call it, your lower self and your divine self. And that realization, the deep awareness that your Atma has, that is within your Atma, which is this eternal relationship and connection with God. So the Bhagavad Gita is a beautiful story, and it's a beautiful journey that takes one through this yoga. And to practice this yoga, there are infinite many ways, because there are infinite many ways how you can express your love. There are infinite many souls, and each one has a unique relationship. Each one has a unique flavor of that love. So this yoga there, it's the most broad, it's the most complete understanding of yoga. And he opens up, again, there also to many paths. He describes variations of yoga, different journeys you can take. And all that, wherever you look nowadays, what we call spirituality, even the spiritual traditions, Hinduism as a whole, it's connected to the Gita in many aspects. And you can see that the Gita talks about fundamental understandings of spirituality. Who is God? Who are we? And who is this world? What are we doing here? All that. It's the Bible of Hinduism. And here, yoga is spirituality. In that sense, nowadays we don't use the word yoga often in that context. So this understanding of yoga is often nowadays, I wouldn't say lost, because it's not lost, but we don't use the word yoga to refer to the Gita. However, that is, I would say, the most complete understanding of yoga. And we try to teach also the philosophy of the Gita in Atma Kriya and to give the people an understanding what stands behind that. So the second understanding of yoga would be Patanjali's yoga. In Hinduism, we have the Shaddarshanam, the 6 branches, let's say.
Philosophical branches.
Philosophical branches. One could argue they are distinct, at the same time they are also connected.
There's a lot of overlap.
There are overlap, and that yoga, Patanjali's yoga, is now more about practice. The Patanjali's Yoga Sutras became, let's say, the scripture to define yoga. And if you look at the scripture, he actually talks also a lot about philosophy. And if you look there, it's very interesting. Many things are aligned with the Gita.
Agreed.
Especially chapter 1 and then also chapter 2.
Sankhya yoga a little bit.
Yeah. He talks about that. He talks about the philosophy. He talks about bhakti. He talks about the importance of the guru. He talks about all those things. And then he goes more in detail about, let's say, yoga practices, yoga steps. He doesn't really talk much about techniques, but he maps out the journey where the different techniques take you. And this is the 8 steps of Patanjali.
Ashtanga. Right?
Ashtanga, yes. He doesn't, however, use the word Ashtanga. He uses the word even Kriya Yoga. In 2.1, he uses the word Kriya Yoga. This is the only yoga that he uses. And he explains that Kriya Yoga has 3 parts. It's discipline, it's self-observation, and it's devotional practice. So
but to my understanding, he defines Kriya Yoga more as in the literal sense. Like, this is what yoga in action is. Like, so yoga as an idea can be presented as a theory, but when you put that theory into practice, that is what it is. And he gives exactly that description. He says that's Kriya Yoga. So I mean, Kriya just literally means action, aware action. But
Kriya means the action with awareness. Right. So he does talk about that. And he does talk about, the Guru and what is important there. He talks a little bit about God. He calls him Ishvara, which is the personal God. However, then he goes into the practice and he defines the 8 steps. And he talks about asana, pranayama, and finally he comes to meditation, dhyan, and samadhi. So, and he explains that those steps go into each other. And like this, he maps out his journey.
Right.
He doesn't give much technique. He talks about meditation, yes, but he doesn't really give you any asana, any pranayama, not much of mantra. I think he talks about Om, but he doesn't really go more deep in that. And I think we have to put here Patanjali into the historical context. There is not much known about Patanjali.
True.
But the traditions talk about him, also Guruji talks about him, as being an incarnation of the divine who came here to give this teaching. And the scripture, the Patanjali Yoga Sutra that he gave, was part of the philosophical context and the Hinduist and Hindu culture in which he lived. He didn't have to explain all of that. The Gita was well known. He didn't have to reiterate the Gita. He referred to certain key concepts, but he didn't have to repeat all of that. He didn't start a new thing. He formalized what is yoga.
Systematized, formalized.
And that's where he is called the father of yoga. Because he was the first one who described yoga in the most complete philosophical sense. The Upanishads, some Upanishads talked about yoga already before, but it was a little bit scattered. He created that complete scripture about yoga. So, and that became the ground for the evolution of yoga from there. So, many different traditions took upon this yoga, took upon his scripture, and took upon this philosophy. And they adapted it also to their path, to their philosophy, to their theology. And you can see yoga in many different branches. And now I'm talking yoga about techniques.
Right.
And yoga goes here as a methodology. It's technique, it's a sadhana, it's a practice, it's a tool, an instrument that helps you to walk your path. That path can be very different. Somebody who venerates Shiva, they will do yoga that is designed to venerate Shiva. Somebody who is focusing more on an Advaitic stance will do such yoga. Somebody who is more Vaishnava will do this yoga. Yoga, the technology of yoga can be used in many senses. Also yoga, those techniques have been used also for therapeutic use, for health reasons, for all kinds of reasons. So yoga in that sense, the techniques, they're everywhere. And if you look, the techniques are not the same.
No.
They always fit to the philosophy they're practiced in.
Mm-hmm.
And yoga evolved. As Hinduism evolved, yoga evolved. We had different scriptures that came later. Hatha Yoga Pradipika is one of the famous ones. Shiva Samhita, also very famous. They came and they reiterated on what Patanjali said. What's interesting here, they also talk about steps of yoga, but not always about the same 8 steps. It's the same path that is sometimes broken down in 12 steps or in 6 steps. But you can see it's the same path.
With minor alterations here and there.
Yeah. They talk about eventually the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yoga here, I don't know how much we should go there, especially with the rise of Shaktism and the movement of Tantra. And Kundalini started to the branch of Raja Yoga.
I think it's relevant in so much as it's sometimes I feel like part of the reason why some Vaishnava traditions are put off by yoga, because there is a perceived connection with these kind of movements sometimes, or with more esoteric movements, and it can seem a little counterintuitive or counter culture to a Vaishnava to do that kind of thing. So I think we're good to address, that is a specific branch that has arisen, but it's not definitional to yoga. It's not, inherent.
It's not. And I think what is important to say at that point, yoga has been mainly taught from master to student. Yoga has been taught in a practical way, like you learn driving a car. You can read books about it, doesn't give you much use. The best practice is go and drive. How you learn to drive a car, how you learn to drive the bicycle. And you do it under the guidance of a master who has achieved yoga, who knows yoga. And this teaching, and you can see it very much with Guruji, doesn't just come from the mind. It's an experience, it's through experience. And he helps you he guides you in that experience. He guides you in that practice. And that's what masters did centuries over centuries. What is here also important always, yoga was never separated from the philosophy that goes along with that. And we see it more nowadays, where there's a split. But traditionally, for centuries, yoga, philosophy, theology, the Vedanta that is connected to that, all of that came together. Mm-hmm. And like this, different paths that have different philosophies, they talk about yoga also differently. They talk differently about how yoga works. They talk differently about what the techniques do. They have different intentions to do yoga. Like somebody who does yoga in a sense of karma yoga or raja yoga will do it differently, will do it more as an instrument that gets me somewhere. It's more about the action you do. And here also, it's more about what is the strongest technique I can do? What is the best yoga? Because you're looking for an instrument.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And sometimes if you want to drill a hole, you can have a screwdriver, or you can have a machine that helps you. Or you want to have the most secret mantra.
Right.
And that became also, let's say, a trend in modern days, where you have to find the best yoga. The background from that is also philosophy. For us, we focus on bhakti. Here you don't really have that I need to have the best technique. I could argue that we have very strong techniques, but we don't think about techniques in that way. The techniques are designed by bhakti. They are designed to be bhakti. And this is again done by the masters who know bhakti and who know yoga. And they can merge those two, such that a yoga technique doesn't become an instrument, but it becomes love.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe to make an example here, somebody, for example, let's take pranayamas. Yeah, pranayamas is alternating nostril breathing, mostly. You can do this technique as something that purifies your nadis, purifies your chakras, cleanses you, lifts up your consciousness. And you see that this exercise, when I do it, has this result. Perfect. Very nice. I want to purify myself, so I do that.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. There's no problem here. I'm not putting it in any negative light. It's wonderful. Please do it. However, in Bhakti, when we do, for example, pranayama, we do it with a certain also mantra and with the initiation and with a certain awareness, where it becomes worship, where you understand that the prana you're breathing comes from him. And as we offer different elements on the altar to God,
during
the same
rituals and different things.
As we breathe in and out, we offer this prana also to him, and we take this prana as prasad, as a blessing from him. It's his grace that is invigorating us.
But what you're describing is a mentality, right? It's an attitude, because the physical act, as I'm understanding, is the same between the person who does it for purification purposes and this person that you're describing, us, who does it as worship. The differentiating factor is the mentality. It's the intentionality, right?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So, first of all, yes, but actually the technique itself is also different.
Right, because it's infused with this intention.
It's infused.
Right.
And you can't do the technique we do and call it and see it not as a bhakti, because the pure action, if you don't have the awareness itself, if you look how the action is designed, bhakti is encoded into this technique.
Mm-hmm.
So, but first of all, you're right. Let's say I would make you a gift. Let's say I would gift you a phone.
Mm-hmm.
I could make this same action in different sense. I could think, well, maybe it's your birthday. Maybe I'm your friend. So you were talking that you need a phone. And maybe I see it as my duty to gift you something. And I give it to you because it's something that you do when you have your birthday.
Right. And because you're nice.
And I'm nice. Most of the time. And that's one way of doing this action.
Right.
Another way of doing the same action is, well, I appreciate you. I would like to express my gratitude to you, my gratitude for our friendship, and I would, as an expression of this gratitude and of this friendship, I would like to give you something. So yes, this one action is the same on the outside, but what I do within me is different.
Of course.
And this is where yoga resides. This, when you actually study the Gita, you see this is where yoga is. And this starts already with karma yoga, jnana yoga, or bhakti yoga. The yoga is happening within.
Mm-hmm. If I can pull back to, so you said that your working definition is that it's a conscious path to God, right? And I think if that is the case, it already, in some sense, answers or eliminates a lot of the issues that we see in the modern landscape of yoga. Again, when I say issues, it's not that I'm condemning. I agree with you what you said earlier. It's not a condemnation, but even if something is not worthy of condemnation, that doesn't mean it's also optimized, right? So it's somewhere in the middle. It's both fine that you do it the way you do it as a very sort of mundane, materialistic thing, physical thing. But I think it's undeniable that there is such a thing as the origin of yoga, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things that I always come back to is chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says essentially that he taught it to the sun god, right? And he describes a succession of teaching, and then he says, with the passing of time, this is lost, and therefore I come to reestablish it. And there is an element of surprise from Arjuna, sort of saying, but you're here with me now, how could you have taught it? And so he's actually described specifically in the Gita as the Lord of Yoga, Krishna, right? And so if we take Krishna to be God on a theological perspective, because there has to be some theology here where we have to actually accept the premise that Krishna is divine and what he's speaking is divine revelation, then clearly yoga has its origins in God, literally, right? And so the way that, for me, the Bhagavad Gita, as you mapped out these three, Bhagavad Gita, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and then this more modern understanding, the Gita clearly is the foundation. It clearly is, not that the Gita itself is the foundation, but the Gita reveals what or who the foundation is. In this case, it's God. It comes from him, and it's designed to take you to him, in a sense, right? And so therefore my initial position is that anything that is a deviation to that is not automatically illegitimate, but it is automatically less legitimate than that, because that is the presented original intent of it. Now, you can interpret it and you can change the intentionality, as you said, but I do believe that there is an inherent infused, encoded principle into it, as you said. When I then transition to that second description you gave of Patanjali, it feels to me like what Patanjali is doing is, yes, he's making it more practical, more structured, correct? Same way with like what Ramanuja did for Vedanta and Adi Shankara and others. But I also feel like he's a little misconstrued, Patanjali, because, as you said, father of yoga, nowadays I don't know of a single yoga training that happens anywhere that doesn't include some loose reference to Patanjali Yoga Sutras as, this is where it comes from, etc. But I feel like Patanjali never positioned himself as, I've created this yoga system. He recognizes origins and he takes it and says, I'm just making it coherent. I'm putting it together. I'm doing this, that, and the other. But he's very much seeing himself as a conduit, as a bridge between that and this presentation, which are the Yoga Sutras, right? And so I feel like any fixation on what Patanjali presents as being the yoga, in a sense, without understanding that he was a conduit for something before him, is again flawed. It's again incomplete, right? And so I think one of the things that is difficult for someone like a Guruji, who's very much aware of all of this, very much in the same wavelength as Krishna is in the Gita, when he looks at modern yoga, he's just so critical of it. And I feel like because he has that obvious reaction to it, we as his students, but who are in a sense way more like the modern audience than he is, we are also somehow stuck in the middle. We're almost like bridges where I know very well what Krishna says about yoga. I know very well what Guruji thinks about yoga. I know very well what's in the mind of the people that are coming to take this course. And they're not going to sit there day one to hear Ishvara Pranidhana, right? It's about self-surrender to God.
Yeah. But
that's Patanjali Yoga Sutras.
Definitely.
That's Bhagavad Gita before it. That's the eternal dharma of the soul, right? And it's, I think no practice is as diverse, but also consequently as dispersed, which I mean is as spread out as yoga is, from its highest objectives to its lowest versions that it can be practiced in. You know what I mean? Like, and it's a difficult thing. My experience, I'm not sitting here offering a solution. It's more like an observation that I find that is often the challenge.
Absolutely. I think you explained it really well.
How do you deal with this stuff? I mean, like as a teacher, like for sure you get students who come with all these modern ideas.
The quick answer is by educating.
Right.
By educating them where it comes from, where it is today. But you have touched firstly about Krishna in the Gita, that he gave it. And then Patanjali was also aware of all that. You're talking about the succession of masters who taught yoga.
Right.
And I think to understand yoga, we need to understand this succession. So let's talk about it in a moment. What you're referring to is that spread, that where it was in the Gita, what Krishna gave, and then he talks about this event of getting lost, of something, of forgetting something. And then what we see nowadays also in yoga. Here we need to understand what happened. And that's part of this education that I would really love to spread.
Mm-hmm.
So yoga started to come to the West, so to Europe, to America, to the Western cultures. In the end of the 19th centuries, a lot of in the 20th centuries, and now in the 21st, it's well established.
It's big industry.
It's right here.
Yeah.
So when the masters, why I'm saying end of 19th centuries, they were the first, let's say, masters who came from India to the West.
Mm-hmm.
They came to the US, some even spoke to the Congress,
Right.
to the parliament or something like this. And they went
Talking about Vivekananda?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they came to Europe and they start to share the Hindu culture, the Hindu philosophy. And together with that, they started to share what they do, because this is also what they did in their daily practice. So, and then came also more famous. Yogananda was one of the big.
Of course.
And we have many more later. So when they brought yoga, they come from a path and tradition where yoga is merged with the philosophy and theology. And where what you're referring to, there is this understanding and consciousness where it comes from. And the teaching of the Gita or whatever the teaching of that path is. And they understand that the yoga is a methodology, is an expression of that. So what happened, especially in the last 100 years, is that the masters came to the West, and call it however you want, but the philosophy was not well accepted or understood. It was not taken into practice, especially with Christian background, bringing there a very different religion. It didn't have the space for that. So, however, but the techniques were taken very well, because the techniques, you can communicate them in a very also scientific way. You can study them. So you teach them, you see what they do,
Mm-hmm.
people experience it. That's the big part of yoga. You experience it. You don't need much talk. Do it. How do you feel now? It speaks for itself.
Right.
So this went like wildfire. People took it and they're like, this is a great technique. This is a great technique. And now the next generation after those masters, these were now Westerns who were born in Europe or the US mainly, and who learned from those masters and who started then to spread it further. But often the philosophy was detached from the methodology. And that's this detachment. That's the key historical event that happened. In addition to that, there comes no methodology can go without philosophy. It doesn't work, because you always ask questions. What is this? How does it work? Where is it coming from? Where is it leading me to?
Mm-hmm.
So here, our Western scientific modern understanding has started to explain yoga in a different way, in a more scientific way, in a more appropriate way, in a more way that fits also some marketing purpose, that you can spread well, that it explains more the benefits.
Right.
You do that,
tangible outcomes for it.
there needs to be
yeah,
tangible
for it to
outcomes.
spread, yeah.
And it's been fit to the culture that we have here, or that we had here.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, those yoga, I don't even know whether to call it schools, but those yoga branches, those yoga institutions, organizations, started to, make different, I call it centers and yoga studios and its own schools.
Mm-hmm.
Often they just take techniques from this master, this tradition here, and they put it together. They give it a nice name, hot yoga, whatever yoga there is, goat yoga, I don't know what, many different yoga. Yeah. And this becomes the yoga that is being then presented
You
here.
can Google goat yoga, by the way, if you want to have some fun.
There are some really beautiful videos on that. But before we go here, I would like to quickly pause and just to clarify. I don't think that we are talking here right now about this modern yoga in a negative sense, that because yoga, what it does today, is also very beautiful. It helps people with health, with mental problems, with dealing with stress, it gives them a very
physical well-being in general.
Yeah, a very healthy lifestyle.
Of course.
Nothing of that is to be diminished.
Yeah, sure.
It's very good. And even if more people nowadays would practice this yoga, we would live in a better world.
Shandilya, I just wish it had a different name. That's all it
Me
is.
too.
Because for me, there's actually 3 types of yoga, and yes, you've characterized it as Bhagavad Gita, Patanjali, modern. I would almost say there is theological yoga, which is yoga as a part of a much wider theological scope. Then there's yoga as a philosophy, Shaddarshanam, which is like devoid of any theological considerations, just the philosophy of the human psychology, sort of an extension of Sankhya. It's practical Sankhya. It's like just there is a distinction between matter and spirit, and just understanding that entanglement and how to resolve all of that. That's yoga philosophy, right? Yoga theology is literally a pathway to uniting with a specific deity, with a specific God, right? And then there's yoga practice, which is independent of any philosophical conceptions or any theological considerations. It's just the hard, like physical practices and their scientific empirical outcomes, right? And that's what we're discussing as being this well-being industry, all of these things that people traditionally practice for. And it's no surprise that this one is the one that booms the most, because it doesn't require any philosophical understanding nor acceptance, or any theological understanding or acceptance. It's just, hey, you're a Christian. Hey, you're an atheist. Hey, you're this. Practice this. You get this outcome. You'll feel better. Don't have to compromise your Islam, your Christianity. You don't have to compromise this, that, and the other. And where those people sometimes take exception, like, for example, some Christians will say yoga comes from the devil. Why? Because they look at the philosophy and the theology and say, that's problematic for our position. That's devilish. But the practice itself is not, right? Because it's just a physical thing with a physical outcome, right? And that's why I'm saying, if the 3 of these had different names or different terms, or like this yoga or this yoga, it would immediately be an easier thing to navigate and to distinguish, because people would automatically know what you're talking about, right? But because there isn't that so much, I mean, we try, like you said, there's hot yoga, there's Atma Kriya yoga. And by this, you already somehow start to understand probably the depth to which it's going to land on each of these camps. But still, if there was just a differentiation of terms, it would be a much, much easier conversation.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
It would be more easy. My job, my life would be definitely
all
more
of us.
easy.
I think it's just important to map this out, because I think that's the real issue. We're talking about things that are really, in a sense, fenced off from each other. They can be one thing. No one's saying they can't. But the most often reality is that they're not. They're just not.
They're not, no. And the best thing that we can do nowadays is to educate people on that, to say, look, here's Atma Kriya, here are different other yogas. This is maybe what you have learned in your local yoga studio. And as we show this big picture, one of the beautiful parts of being able to teach Kriya is that I can widen this perspective. And people start to understand yoga very differently. And I can say, the one yoga that you have learned, it's such a small part of a much more and wide understanding of yoga.
Yeah.
And there are so many different other ways to do yoga. Let me show you this tradition that I have here.
Yeah.
And I invite you to try it out.
Yeah.
And this yoga, you practice it differently, you experience it differently. And it's designed differently.
Mm-hmm.
So nowadays, we have many yoga schools. We have many of those branches. And the difficult part is that you're referring to is that when we say yoga, we mean different things.
Yeah.
And that's why I say it would be nice to have a different word for it.
Right.
So even right now, we are talking about Bhagavad Gita yoga, Patanjali yoga, modern yoga. So the real education about yoga would need to combine all of that. And even more, you don't need to do yoga practices to do yoga. Somebody who is studying the scriptures is doing yoga. Somebody who is doing service is also doing yoga. Somebody who is singing the divine name is also doing yoga. There are so many different ways to do yoga. However, it needs to be a conscious path. And you need to be consciously aware of that philosophy. What the danger is, and that's a very clear danger nowadays, where yoga is even distorted, where people allow themselves to make up their own philosophy.
Right.
And they pick it up from different pieces, from different even traditions. Even let's say here you have Advaita, here you have Advaita, they have Vishishta Advaita and all of that. And they just pick up and they think it's all one. They have the same, they have the same word, yoga, Atma, God, and all of that.
Yeah.
Well, they talk about the same thing. And now I just pick it up however I want.
Yeah.
And I make it up by myself. And now as I practice, I even allow myself to combine those techniques. This is not even just proper, it can even be dangerous. Because the techniques which are done by the masters, you can imagine it like a car. When we buy a car nowadays, it can be a Mercedes, it can be a VW, it can be a Bentley, whatever it can be. Those cars are done by educated, qualified engineers. And they are built to work as a system. A car is a system of techniques. It's very much aligned even with the values and with the purpose of the company, what this car should serve. This company even has a certain worldview, even a certain understanding of humankind. And they serve that. And you see the different car manufacturers from different countries think about building a car differently.
Correct. Yeah.
And they build it very differently. Now, what would be dangerous if you say, well, I like the color of this, Mercedes. I like the engine of this, Ford. And I like the wheel of this Ferrari. Let me just take this, put it all together, and now I drive. Well, that's can be a dangerous instrument.
Right.
So here we need to really understand where yoga comes from.
I agree. Education. I mean, and your general sentiment is education. Education really is what people need. I do agree with that. I think the people also need to have their concerns or their fears, I think, resolved. Because, like, for example, I dialogue with people across the spectrum, right? As you do as well. We talk to people who are completely new to all this. They have no understanding of any theology or philosophy. They just want the practices. And I speak to people on the other side of the spectrum that almost look at, for example, other Vaishnavas who look at us in Bhakti Marga doing Atma Kriya Yoga, preaching Atma Kriya Yoga, thinking, why we do Bhakti Yoga? Why are you preaching what appears to be a more asana-based, meditative-based yoga, right? And I think all of these need to be properly answered to show the whys and the compatibility, because it's one thing for us to say there are these three distinct things. We've done that. There's one thing to say, here's the origin. We should look to the origin and you'll get more understanding. Good, we've also done that. But what I think we could do is build concrete bridges between the three to show why one who's fixed in this will benefit from this or this. Why one who's fixed in this will benefit from this one or that one. And by answering that, you make the road to get from one position to the other easier, more enticing, more attractive. So for example, a Vaishnava who's just chanting the name of God, devotional practices that are more traditional to the Vaishnava path, they'll look at this group over here, the pure postures group that just does it for physical well-being, whatever. Some might look at it and say, yeah, it's good. It's good to stretch and do a bit of physical workout so that you don't feel bad. But they'll never give any more value to it than that. And some will say, they'll look at the Srimad Bhagavatam that says, all you should do is maintain the minimum amount of effort necessary to maintain your soul and body together, which basically means sleep, eat, and keep minimal health, right? Like don't give more attention to the physical body. Like don't become, too obsessed about it. as we know, a lot of the yoga pants, yoga mat, yoga retreat crowd is quite bodily conscious. So let's put it like this, quite body obsessed, if I want to be a little more provocative, right? And they look at that with not disgust, but like definitely like materialistic. This is materialistic, right? So the easy bridge there is, again, your physical and mental well-being is absolutely conducive to the quality of your service as a bhakta, to the quality of your expression as a servant, your longevity, all of these factors, right? Do it for those reasons, it becomes an act of service in of itself, right? If I am preparing myself adequately to serve you, the preparation period is part of the service. This is why actually your name is beautiful, because Shandilya, from the Shandilya Bhakti Sutras, Sage Shandilya, he said essentially this. He put bhakti as having two tiers. There's primary bhakti and secondary bhakti, but it's still bhakti. So it's like, as long as that secondary tier, the activities performed there are being done to feed the primary tier consciously. And it goes back to your definition about conscious path, right? So in that he included karma yoga and jnana yoga, for example. That they are bhakti yoga, but of a secondary nature, because they are performed so that your bhakti yoga thrives, right? So same thing. If I go to a yoga studio, take my yoga mat, wear my yoga pants and do it because I want to, look sexy, it's not secondary bhakti, right?
Right.
If I do it because I want to be in the optimal physical and mental shape in order to go to the temple and serve, in order to serve the community, to serve mankind, guru, God, people, it's secondary bhakti, because it is creating the platform for my primary bhakti to be even more successful, right? That's one thing. I want to touch on Atma Kriya because that's your area of expertise as well. You said there was something a little different to that, because what I'm describing is still a mentality. It's still an attitude of, hey, you can do this for this reason, or you can do it for this reason, and it becomes secondary bhakti. You're saying, if I understood you correctly, irrespective of any intentionality or mentality, you said hard-coded, right? Bhakti is in the technique itself.
Yeah.
So tell me, someone who comes to learn Atma Kriya Yoga, they hear all the right things from the teacher, but they still go home and they want to practice it only to be fit and have mental well-being. They're not interested in this stuff. What is that hard-coded bhakti doing to them?
Right. So, love it. So thank you. Because we come right to the core of Kriya and what it means to be hard-coded.
Right.
It's not just a mental thing. It is the Kriya itself. So, and this is connected with Shaktipat.
Cool.
This is connected with the grace of the master.
So Shaktipat is the initiation.
Shaktipat is the initiation that is given by the master to the student. Whoever receives Atma Kriya is receiving Shaktipat. They don't receive it mostly directly from Guruji, but the Atma Kriya Yoga teachers are initiated by Guruji to pass on his grace.
Yeah, like proxies, yeah.
So that Shaktipat makes Kriya, makes technique to Bhakti. And I can make an example. We don't share like publicly, normally we cannot share many techniques, but I can talk about Japa. Japa Kriya, it's the first Kriya in Atma Kriya Yoga, and it's the chanting of the divine name.
Right.
So let's look at this practice from two perspectives. So the, let's say, more like technical side of it is I'm chanting a mantra. That mantra has a certain vibration. As more as I chant, as more as I tune to this vibration. Also, I practice meditation. It calms my mind. So that action has a certain effects on me. It calms me down. I'm focused. I'm more calm. Many other things. So, is this now bhakti? Is this now love? By itself, not yet.
Right, I would say no. Yeah.
I would also say no. It becomes bhakti through Shaktipat. And which bhakti we have here is Shravana bhakti. Shravana bhakti is the bhakti of listening to the divine, to the stories of God. What does it mean exactly? So, whenever we are telling a story about Krishna, about Narasimha, about Rama, about the saints, when we listen to it, we connect to that story. And we connect to him who is inside that story. If you want to get to know God, get to know him through his glories, through his actions, through his stories, through his saints. The same way, if I want to get to know you, I will ask you, what were you doing? Tell me about you.
Sure. But what if the person doesn't want to get to know God? Like how does chanting of japa help them get there if they don't actually like consciously have that desire? Because it's infused, right? So
Very
bhakti
good.
is still happening.
Let me explain why Bhakti is still happening,
That's
where
what I really
Shaktipat is coming in. And then we can talk about somebody who doesn't want that.
Okay.
So now you get initiated into the name of God. And now what we say normally, well, you need to get a mantra diksha, the initiation into the mantra, which is all in Hinduism everywhere. You need to get the mantra from your guru, such that the mantra is full, such that it unlocks itself. But what does it really mean? So if I would say, if you chant the name of Ram and you don't have initiation, is the name not the name? Is it not? We are saying the name of God is God.
Right.
Why does it need an initiation? Because the name is the name.
It's a great question.
It's a very good question. And here comes the master. Because when we chant the name of Ram, of Krishna, of Narasimha, any divine name, we are chanting it on our level of awareness, on our level of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And when we say Ram, we don't know him yet because we haven't realized him. We have a certain maybe awareness of him. But in Sanskrit, the intention and the awareness behind the chanting makes the meaning. So when I say it and I don't know him, he's still there, but not in his fullness. But when you have a master, a God-realized master, he knows God. He knows him. When he says Ram, he knows who he is. He knows him personally. And when he says Ram or Krishna, then he means him fully because of his divine realization of who God is. And when he gives Shaktipat, when he initiates somebody, then he passes that awareness up on his students.
Mm-hmm. A transfer of energy of
sorts. A transfer of energy, a transfer of this realization. It doesn't mean that I directly know Ram.
Right.
But now, that Kriya, that practice, is initiated with my Guru's grace. Now, when I chant Om Namo Narayana, let's say, Shri Vitala Gedai Parabrahmane Namaha, his awareness, he is chanting with me.
Mm-hmm.
As I chant the mantra, he is with me. And he is guiding me towards that awareness. And it's becoming like a pulling effect that is pulling my heart to him. Because now there is something in me that knows him. And this is the Guru's grace inside the heart of the Bhakta, inside of my practice. And he gave me his grace in the form and connected to the Kriya. And now he says, practice this Kriya and I'm with you. And this is a very big difference between Atma Kriya and, let's say, modern yoga. In modern yoga, it is me, I, who is practicing it through my own effort. And that's the philosophy a lot of karma yoga.
Mm-hmm.
In bhakti yoga is I practice together with him.
Mm-hmm.
He is with me as I practice. That's why it becomes a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
This podcast is a conversation between you and I. It becomes part of who we both are.
Right.
And we invite everybody to join us into this dialogue. You could film a monologue. We could talk about the same topic, but it's not the same as when it becomes part of a relationship. And as we do Kriya, the technique is almost secondary, because the technique becomes a means to experience that relationship with somebody. If you and I, we did many things together.
Mhm.
And if we say, you're my friend, let's hang out, let's go somewhere, let's do some sports, let's watch a movie, let's just talk. I need to talk to you.
Right.
Whatever we do here, we experience our friendship. And that is often most valuable. And this is what all people, all humans, we long for. We long for human connection. We long for that love. And whenever we meet with somebody, what we actually do when we meet with our best friend or with our beloved is almost secondary.
Right.
It's more important with who we do it. And that's how Kriya is designed. That's how Atma Kriya is designed. Those actions become a way to be with my eternal best friend, with the friend of my soul, with God.
It's union, right?
It's a union.
Mhm.
And that is the understanding of yoga. Yoga
Exactly.
exactly means that union.
Right, from huge, yeah.
Yeah. And here is how the Kriya through Shaktipat, where Bhakti is encoded to it. Bhakti is a relationship. It's not that I do something to get Bhakti. If you want to experience love, go and love. If you want to experience the relationship with somebody, go and be together with that person. And this is how Kriya is designed. So there are 9 forms of Bhakti. Now, we can go into that, but basically 9 different ways how this Bhakti, how this divine love can be expressed. And there's the 9 categories. And the Atma Kriya is designed by taking those 9 ways, like so listening, singing, remembering, serving, and all of that. And those 9 forms, the master have taken those bhaktis and have put them into Kriya techniques. So he has designed those cars, those techniques, those instruments that allow you to experience that aspect of your relationship with him in this action. So as if you and I, we would go and we would play basketball. That's one way to experience you and I, my relationship.
Sure.
We could go and watch a movie. We can go and sit and talk. We can go many things.
It's one intention with many vehicles. Like the intention is to experience the connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like this, Atma Kriya is designed.
Right.
And the Shaktipat is what puts the awareness and the presence of the divine into the practice.
Mm-hmm.
So
it feels to me like the Shaktipat clearly is the X factor here, but it's clearly like this a tuning principle, like we tune to each other's frequency, us and the divine, through the principle of the Shaktipat. The Shaktipat does that. It creates this alignment, whether it is conscious to our mundane mind or not, right? Because I think one of the things, this is a age-old discussion. There's in Christianity, there was a famous concept called Pascal's wager, which was Blaise Pascal, who was a philosopher who at the time essentially said that better to believe in God, even if it's fake, because then if God really exists, you're saved, right? And of course, the critiques were, well, is God that cheap that he would believe in fake belief, right? And so somehow the same principle comes to something like this. Often in the field of yoga, you say to somebody, "Oh, just chant the name of God. There'll be some benefit," right? And there's always this feeling of like, but will there really? Because the people are not doing it with any taste, with any real intentionality, with no appreciation, sometimes no knowledge whatsoever of who that God is, that name is depicting, right? And so there have been criticisms of like this mentality that says, just do it, just chant, Bhakti will be there, it's all, wonderful, because it's a little bit like Pascal's wager, right? But I think what you're introducing, this idea of the Shaktipat and the grace of the masters, is that it's Pascal's wager only to your conscious mundane mind, in a sense. Like your mind isn't necessarily aware, but something in you is aligned and is attuning. And as you do that practice, you are aligning and attuning. And as you become more aligned and more attuned, it naturally creates more awareness even to the mind. So it's a gradual process of becoming aware of the bhakti that's already being expressed, that's already there. And so it also, what is cool about this explanation is that bhakti then is not seen as a mental activity. It's something more profound. And Patanjali, he brings forward the theory of perception or knowledge that I like very much in the Yoga Sutras. It's about, in a sense, ordinary perception, sensory perception, pratyaksha as a pramana, to yoga pratyaksha, which is like pure perception that is not entangled with interpretation, thoughts, imposition of mind objects, names and forms, but just when you see things at their actual essence. And this is only possible at the transcendent level. And so I would always argue that true relationship between the Atma and God is that. It's only at that true level, because all this material attribution and concepts and ideas, I mean, Guruji, how many times he said it? I can't actually describe God to you. I can't actually describe Vaikuntha to you. We just give ideas. But you'll get the real experience when you transcend the world of ideas and limited material concepts. And so actually Patanjali says the same in his Yoga Sutras, and he maps out a path to, he says, yogas chitta vritti nirodha, right? Still the mind. And people think, oh, so yoga means just to like stop thinking. No. Wider context. Still the mind, in a sense, revert the gaze away from the objects, the objective world, in a sense, to the subject. So who is seeing? And then you look at yourself and you experience your actual nature of bliss and everything else. But then, and this is where I think the theological point comes and the bhakti point comes, once you look even deeper within yourself, you see that yourself comes from something else. There's an extension to yourself, because like looking at a finger and saying, but the finger has an extension, which is an arm, which is a whole body, and that's God. So then in the end, your mind, the vrittis are stopped only in the externalized sense, but you internalize that gaze, and then eventually you see all of this. And I think it's just what I would say to the person, therefore, is Atma Kriya is infused with bhakti. You may not perceive it at first. You may not experience it, feel it, think it, see it, but it doesn't mean it's not there. It's a process, a path, as you correctly pointed out in the very beginning, of reverting that gaze away so that you can actually see. And the brilliant thing is that through the Shaktipat, this is happening automatically. Like the whole thing is happening for you, in a sense, activated by this for you. And it just takes sort of time, a process for you to slowly start to experience that change.
I think you're right at the core of the two sides of yoga. On one side, we have yogas chitta vritti nirodhana. But this is the most famous definition of what is yoga. Patanjali wrote it.
Yeah.
And he's saying yoga is the act of calming the waves of the mind.
Right.
Yeah, the fluctuations of the mind. And if I take it literally, then I come to a very nihilistic way of understanding the words, where I say, well, I need to calm the mind, I need to attain full calmness, full stillness.
You come to Buddhism.
Yeah, that's you attain this nirvana,
right.
You attain the nothingness.
Right.
Well, great. Why would I want to attain nothingness? Please raise your hand who wants to attain nothingness.
Because it's not suffering.
It's
a lot of people would prefer nothingness to bad experience.
Yes. So,
absolutely.
And this is a very, even actually Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says in chapter 6, that is the very purpose of yoga.
To end to end suffering, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it is correct. Yeah. The point is, it's not wrong.
But a few verses later, he then says, but when you focus on the Lord, you experience the highest happiness.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and
context.
Yoga is, in the first sense, a purification. Guruji said, as similar to what you just said, also, he can't teach us to love, because it's something that is already part of our true nature. It's something already that we are. It cannot be learned. It can be remembered.
Awakened.
Awakened. It's covered right now. And a big part of yoga is to remove this cover, what you just was also talking about, and to remove those false identifications, understandings, intentions, attachments, whatever, to remove that. And then what stays is this beautiful Atma, this beautiful part of God, who you truly are. And everything what you're not is being removed. So, at this point, yoga can be understood, and it's kind of equivalent. It's the same thing. Removing the things that are covering, removing the darkness, or increasing the light.
Mm-hmm.
They're equivalent. But in the world of duality, they are the same. But if you focus just, well, I need to do yoga just to remove my darkness, to purify myself, to do that, well, okay, it's good. What Guruji is saying, you need to also know about the light. You need to have the goal of God also.
Right.
If you do it as purification, yes, it works. You can do it. It will bring you eventually there. So to answer the question, if somebody is just mechanically chanting the mantra, yes, it does something. Absolutely. It's better than not doing it.
Yeah.
But it's not compared to the conscious path towards God, to the conscious building of the relationship with Him, and to have this intention of knowing Him and being with Him. And purification becomes a side effect that you eventually be doing. And then you see that this longing for Him becomes almost the strongest purification that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you come from what we were just referring to, chapter 6, dhyana yoga and karma yoga and all of this, where you come to bhakti yoga.
Right.
And where your focus changes. That you don't think, oh, I need to change myself. I need to be different. I need to be purified. I need to get rid of those things. And I need to calm my mind and not think, which is very difficult.
Yeah. As Arjuna says to Krishna.
Yeah. And where you shift to, okay, I want actually, what does it mean to be in relationship with Him? What does it mean to experience Him? And what does it mean to be aware of Him? What does it mean to do Atma Kriya? Atma Kriya is the action, the conscious action of the soul, of the divine that is in you.
Mm-hmm.
What does it really mean when my soul is put in action?
Mm-hmm.
And this is when you have the awareness of love and when you do it as an expression of love. So those things go hand in hand. And to answer your question before that, what if somebody comes to us and says, well, I don't really want to get to know God.
Not interested, right?
I'm not interested in that.
Yeah.
Well, we come to a very interesting part here, because actually it might be that I will say to the person, well, then I might not be able to teach you Kriya. I would need to ask the person some questions.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I would say, look, this here is the teaching about yoga and how you can build your relationship with God. So this is what we do here. This is what this instrument is doing. Be aware of that.
Right.
So maybe you don't have this conscious intention. Maybe you come here for the side effects that are connected with that. I don't mind if this is what you're looking for. You can take this course. I will teach you. I will talk about Bhakti. I will also talk about how Bhakti calms your mind, makes you stronger, more focused, how it helps you to build more successful relationship and all of that.
Right.
It does. It will be mentioned in that course as well. And those techniques will also give that to you.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to be aware that what it's designed for is to build this relationship. Now, if you, however, would say that you don't believe in that, you don't believe that, maybe you say, I don't believe in God, or I don't want that. You say, I actively reject that.
Yeah.
Then I would say, I'm sorry, but this is what I'm offering. This is the intention behind the Kriya. This is why it was given.
It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
I cannot give it to you if you reject it. It goes against certain laws.
But also, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, don't give this teaching to someone who doesn't want it, in a sense, who's undeserving
Yes.
of it, in a sense. It
That
doesn't
is
make
the
sense.
law.
Doesn't
That
make
is
sense.
the law where it goes against. I cannot force it upon you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you reject what it's all about, even though I'm offering it to you, you will not take it.
So here's a cool thing. I think that therefore needs to be a marriage of the intention of the student and the transparency of the teacher.
Yes.
Because I know of some teachers that are in Bhakti Marga and outside Bhakti Marga, a little devious, I would say. And I don't mean it like in an evil way, but a little devious in the sense that they're very much trying to do a bait and switch. Like, oh yeah, just practice yoga for whatever intention you want. But their agenda is eventually I'm going to convert them towards this bhakti-centric lifestyle. And I just feel like that's all well and good if the person is open-minded. Like if they don't have to say, I want God, but they say, oh, I'm open to whatever comes, that's not a problem.
That's fine.
But if the person says, oh, I'm only looking for this, I'm not looking for any, religious thing, I think there needs to be a match. Because we talked a lot about relationship. I think the teacher needs to be honest to say, I don't think Atma Kriya is a match for you, because Atma Kriya has a very clear direction that it's going to take you in. It's like someone goes to the gym and they go to a personal trainer and they're like, can you teach me how to, lift weights and all these things? But they say, I only just want to do it to pass time. I don't want to actually lose weight and gain muscle. And he'll say, but then I can't teach you to lift weights because yes, you'll pass time, but you will lose weight and you will gain muscle. So if you don't want those things, you're going to get what you wanted, which is to pass time in a social environment that is the gym. But the other things you don't want, they're going to happen.
Right.
So it's the same thing with Atma Kriya. It's like if you just want well-being,
right,
I don't really recommend this to you,
right,
because it will make you also strengthen your relationship to God. And if you don't want that strengthened, maybe not the technique for you.
And I love the example of the gym, because there's something in the gym that we can refer as in Kriya. There's something like muscle soreness. If you go and work out, certain things will hurt.
Yeah.
And you need to be ready for that. And to be honest, if you want to go to the gym, maybe because you want to build some friendship there or to kill your time.
Social experience, right?
Social experience, that's nice. And you don't want muscle soreness. I'm sorry, maybe you then just walk around the gym.
Right, you don't actually do any action. You don't do any activity.
Because
right.
I cannot help you that you lift weights and don't have muscle soreness. It doesn't work.
Agreed.
The same of Kriya. If you do it and you expect that it won't trigger something in you, I'm sorry, you're in the wrong place.
Not only a connection to God, it might trigger a certain disconnection from the mundane world.
Yes.
It might trigger changes in your consciousness.
Yes.
And this is the thing where I think there's a concentrated effort to make yoga as mundane as possible to avoid those exact outcomes, because they are part of yoga. It's embedded. Like you said, it's embedded. And it's just like, if you read Patanjali Yoga Sutras, if you read Bhagavad Gita, it's so clear that yoga is designed to reconnect you, to reunite with the transcendent. And therefore, with the transcendent means, by definition, transcend the material, right? And so to expect there to be no changes to your relationship, not only to the divine, but also your relationship towards the mundane, I mean, that's why we always talk about processes and whatever else on the spiritual path.
Right. And here starts the real, no, I rephrase it. It's not the starts, but here you open up yourself to the real spiritual path. Because as you build this passion to the mundane things, somebody might say, what does it mean? I will lose interest in that? For a very popular thing, as we have it in various techniques, they say, if you do these techniques, it will reduce lust in you. Well, but I like that, But does it mean I will not have any more like this sexual pleasure, or what do we mean?
Right.
No, it's not that. Lust is when it controls you.
Correct.
When it's stronger than you. Kriya teaches you to become aware of that and to see it is part of you. It's not meant to go away in a sense, but you learn to transcend it and to live it as it might be part of your life. It might not be part of your life, depending on how it fits into the bigger context. But you need to learn that bigger context.
This control point you made is excellent, because obviously the Ashtanga talks about attachment and aversion, right? And so this idea that you need to move beyond attachments and aversions, the Gita speaks about this extensively. And sometimes people interpret that as meaning, I will have therefore no likes or dislikes, right? And no, it's not that you won't have likes or dislikes, or that you won't have attractions or aversions to things. It's that there will be no compulsions, right? So the attraction will not compel you to chase it or to act biased by it, nor will the aversion compel you to avoid it or to run from something. You can still have an opinion about something, you can still have experiences, but it doesn't compel you into any kind of thinking, behavior, whatever else. And that's control. It has no control over you. It's the same thing. People expect a yogi or a guru or a saint to be basically sitting under a tree with a white beard, being, in a state of zen.
Yeah, that was me.
Right.
I was expecting that.
And you meet someone like Guruji who's very emotive, right?
Yeah.
Like shows all range of emotions and activity, sometimes very tranquil, sometimes very agitated, sometimes this, that, and the other. People get confused by this until they understand that there's a huge difference between you, the entity, the conscious being subjugated to your emotions and your attractions and your attachments and whatever else, versus you being on top of them, controlling them as a tool. So I use the emotion of happiness, I use the emotion of frustration to communicate messages, to communicate something to the world. But I am in control. Consciously, I am dictating things.
Right.
And that is actually what yoga looks like. When someone who's a master of yoga looks like that, they don't look like someone who's just a blank canvas, a boring nothingness, right? That's not how it is.
That's not how it is. And I think here's also a big misunderstanding of even the Bhagavad Gita.
Right.
Because the Bhagavad Gita is full of statements. You need to be free from those attachments. You need to be free from pleasure and pain and all of that.
Yes.
However, and you need to be free from desires. So actually that is...
Desire is the enemy of the world.
Yeah, and that is actually a fine misunderstanding, because Krishna doesn't... He says the desire born from the guna of rajas is the enemy of the world.
Mm-hmm.
He does later especially talk more about the gunas and sattva. And he says that this is the path. And he also talks about actually, especially when he talks about this, bhakti, to desire him and to desire the highest pleasure. It's the real path. And a true renunciant is not somebody who doesn't do anything. He actually does even more, because he sees the fullness. He doesn't renounce anything. He accepts the divine and the divine relationship, which is the highest pleasure.
Right.
And that's where we talk about that. That's very difficult to understand, I have to say. Because to understand God, we cannot understand God through this world. We need some sort of a master, a guidance, a technique, a scripture that carries that understanding. And
it's a gateway to the transcendent.
Yeah. And this is what often Kriya is. People often come... Nowadays I teach Kriya quite different from when I was teaching it back in the beginning. Yeah. Nowadays I talk much less. In the beginning I would talk a lot during my courses. You're laughing. Nowadays I talk not much, actually. I talk about Bhakti, I talk about the essence, and I talk about how to do the Kriyas with Bhakti. And because I know the words won't do it just. It won't. I want to empower the people to make their own experience. And I know that the experience is encoded into the Kriya. So I want to help them to practice it with the right intention, with the right mindset, and having the right goal in their awareness.
It's funny, I was laughing also because we have, of course, this year in September, a Soul Awakening program in America where Guruji is going to be talking about Kriya quite extensively. So it's a 4-day program, and basically half the day Guruji will be talking about the bhaktis, the forms of bhakti, and then the other half of the day will be teaching the techniques. And so, anyone who's interested in coming, please do come. It's going to be an amazing opportunity. If not, also, if you can't go to America, persons like Shandilya all over the world, Atma Kriya yoga teachers. So, please do take the course. It is special. It's unique. It's something that is, we've been talking about now, describing a lot of what it is. It's about bhakti. It's the Shaktipat is the X factor, and there's a lot to be gained from it. in a very short amount of time, if someone wants to really change their lives and really start to experience what spirituality is meant to be, I think Atma Kriya Yoga is perfect for them, and we have teachers all around the world. So if you want to go to the big show, it's in America in September. If you want to do the regular show, it's all over the world, right?
It's all over the world, yeah. I mean, the best thing we can do is to invite the people to make the experience and to let it speak for itself.
Yeah.
And we cannot do more. We can talk a lot, but you have nothing to lose, really. There are no side effects. If anything what Kriya promises, even just from the benefit side or from the spiritual side, doesn't matter. If anything speaks to you, you have nothing to lose. You have only anything to gain. And spirituality is something, or the understanding of God, or anything like this, there's a lot of philosophy and debating of that.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, there is no conclusive logical answer. You need to find that answer by yourself.
Right.
And until you don't want to find that answer, or you don't put effort in finding that answer, it won't come.
Yeah.
So I invite everybody, try it out.
Yeah.
And if it's not yours, I'm happy for you. Continue your journey wherever it goes. But many people have found their path here, have found their path in Guruji, in Bhakti Marga, in Atma Kriya. The doors are always open. You can come in, you can go out.
Yoga changes lives, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Yoga changes lives. And I mean, I think also everyone should appreciate your honesty and the honesty that we put forward of like, look, this is what Atma Kriya is. And if you're of this mentality or that mentality, it's not for you. And it's no problem. We wish you the best. And if you're open to something new, you don't know if it's for you yet, happy to explore, come, And we, as we said, we've mapped out, the Gita, the Patanjali, the modern, the theological, the philosophical, the physical, like all of this. We are trying to help. I think we did it. We achieved it wonderfully. I think in this conversation, we are being honest, transparent, and mapping out the different concepts so that you can see and listen to this and really feel like, where do I fit into this? Where are my interests really present? So that you can find your own way and not sort of confuse yourself with this landscape of yoga. Am I doing something Hindu now if I just do the practices? Well, no. But if you do the theological yoga, then yes, you are doing something Hindu. It's this kind of trying to map it out for you, trying to help you understand, and inviting, of course, as you did. Any final thoughts from your side? Anything you want to share about yoga that you didn't?
There are many things that I didn't share. So I'm happy if go to the courses, speak to the people, get to know also the masters, get to know the scriptures. Go on this journey. It's the most beautiful journey you have.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice to talk to you again about this.
I love it.
Jai Gurudev. See you next time.
Jai Gurudev.